Hello and good evening, and a very warm welcome to everyone joining us today. On behalf of
Mhm.
Connector.pk, it is a pleasure to welcome you to this exclusive webinar session taking place on March 14, 2026. Thank you for setting aside your time to be part of this professional learning experience. We are delighted to have educators, school leaders, and professionals joining us from different institutions united by a shared commitment to strengthening education. For those who are new to Connector.pk, a brief introduction. Connector.pk is an education focused platform dedicated to connecting global educational expertise with local classroom practice. Our mission strongly aligns with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, in particular SDG 4, Quality Education, SDG 10, Reduce Inequalities, SDG 17, Partnership for the Goals. Through initiatives like today's session, we aim to bridge global knowledge with local implementation, creating mindful partnership that strengthen our education system. Today's session forms part of our exclusive webinar series 2026, designed to support continuous professional development in teaching, learning, and educational innovation. This series provides a structural platform where international experts and local educators engage in dialogue, exchange ideas, and collaboratively reflect on practical strategies that can enhance classroom impact. It is now my honor to introduce our distinguished speaker for today's session, Mr. Richard Pratt. Mr. Pratt is a highly experienced educator and professional with a deep background in educational leadership and academic counseling. His work focuses on fostering student success and supporting institutional growth through strategic guidance. Mr. Pratt, we are truly grateful for your willingness to collaborate with Connector.pk. Your presence today reflects the spirit of SDG 17, building meaningful international partnership to advance educational progress. Thank you for joining us. We now invite you to begin your self introduction. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was so kind and such a generous introduction, um, and lots of fine words. But like everybody in this call, I'm simply a school teacher. I'm a school teacher who has enjoyed a range of different experiences, and relevant to today's webinar, experiences as a school leader. Um, but in some ways slightly unusual, in that most of my leadership roles have been either in startup of new school projects, or in school projects that are explicitly seeking to create different ways of doing school, if we can say that. Um, so the school leader of a number of years, and I'm sure there are other colleagues on the call here who have as many years or more of experience. I hope that what I can bring is possibly some difference, so that there are those experiences can add to the rich experience of the people who are already in this group of new friends. Um, a little about myself. I'm from England, from the United Kingdom. I grew up in the county of Yorkshire. I attended local state schools in my hometown of Huddersfield, where I had the pleasure of many friends from families of Pakistani heritage. And one of the reasons I'm so pleased to be here is, in a way, this reconnects me with those friendships from my childhood. Um, the I attended the University of Oxford and read philosophy, politics and economics there, um, and was later did master's degrees in psychology and in educational leadership. My first teaching role was in what was in those days. Was in 1990. Was called Voluntary Service Overseas. It was a British aid organization, and that's when I first worked in China. China 36 years ago was a very different place to what it is now, and education and schooling was emerging from a long period of disruption and indeed great hardship. And so I was involved in teacher training, specifically English language teacher training, in a teacher training college. I returned to the UK after 4 years and had a teaching career in independent schools in Britain, in the city of Southampton, and 15 years at a school towards the west of London called Eton College, which is where I spent the largest period of my career, including 8 years there as a housemaster. As a boarding school that is probably more famous than it deserves to be, but many people have heard of it. But in 2012, I accepted the invitation to return to China as the founding director of what has been a unique education project, which was the satellite campus for the Chinese International School of Hong Kong. CIS Hong Kong is a very prestigious school in Hong Kong. They were seeking to open a satellite campus in the city of Hangzhou, one of the ancient capitals of China, where the objective was for the students of the Hong Kong Day School to have an experiential boarding experience for 1 year of their school career. And so that's where I first began to be involved in innovative curriculum design and program design, as well as outright school leadership. I was the director of the campus, although it was a part of a wider school. We were 600 miles away from the mother school, as it were. From there, I joined a project that was called the Whittle School and Studios Project. I was only with that for 6 months or so. That was an innovative idea to create a global network of schools that focused on project-based learning and experiential learning. Unfortunately, for a number of reasons, it never really flew. And although it was a very exciting learning experience for me, but I was only with them for 6 months, and I moved from there to become director of education for a proposed group of schools in East Asia under the name of another English private school, Charterhouse. So I spent 3 years there. During that time, we did open one school in Malaysia. It did coincide very much with the period of COVID, however, and so I spent a lot of time sitting in Hong Kong, unable to go anywhere or do anything. But did spend a lot of time thinking. And in that frustration, had the opportunity to move to the city of Shenzhen, where I became head of a school called Avenues. Avenues World School is its full name. That school was, again, part of a global group. There was a partner school in New York City, one in Sao Paulo, Brazil. And Avenues had very much an explicit commitment to project-based learning and to innovative curriculum design. It was an exciting and meaningful position for me. I have to confess, I struggled with being a head teacher in China, again, in the last year or so of COVID, a head teacher in China reporting to a management office in New York, where candidly people did not fully understand circumstances in China. And I learned something there about the nature of the reality of globalized operation. I was in effect the Chinese head, although clearly not Chinese, but reporting to an American leadership that I sadly I don't think really had a good grasp of the situations that we faced. That prompted me to move. My relationship with Avenues soured, and I moved to the school I'm at now. I've been here 3 years. Very happy. Very nice small school in Beijing with a commitment to progressive ideas, project-based learning, innovation in curriculum design. And happily, because it is a small school, it is also locally run. And I found that makes a big difference by comparison with what I did before. Enough of the introduction. I mean, I'm happy to answer more questions about myself personally if any come up. And on that point, right, there we go. I've got I've opened the chat there. Please, if there are any questions while I'm speaking, put them in. Let us not wait to the end for questions and answers. Let us have a dialogue. I propose to speak about the topic that has been assigned to me in instructional leadership and that is important to me personally. But if that takes us to other places, or new ideas occur, or I say something that triggers somebody else's thoughts and they would like to raise it, let's enjoy that process. Now, instructional leadership. I'm going to try sharing my screen briefly, see what happens. Presentation should. Am I having some success here?
There would be a share screen button.
Yeah, I thought
right beside the video call. When you click on it, you might, there might be a pop-up that says what screen you need to share. And then you can share the PDF or whatever, or the presentation. You found it?
I have, but I think I'm going to have to cancel it and start again because something was. Meet needs permission to screen share. I need permission to screen share.
Okay, wait.
Let me try.
Sir, if it'd be okay, can you share the presentation on the number and we can share it? It seems something's missing from your side, but we'll share it if it's possible.
To be honest, it's not that important. It's not a very interesting presentation. Well, there's something I would quite like to, an image I would quite like to share. All right. But a PowerPoint file would be a big file to share, wouldn't it? Don't worry, I'm going to go with it. I'm going to go with it, and I'm going to just see how we go with talking. So the topic that I'm talking about is one that I'm sure will be familiar to everybody, and in many ways it's the start point for discussion, because I think everybody in this call is likely to know what instructional leadership is, and maybe it's featured in your own training or studies. So I don't imagine that I'm introducing a new idea. I'm just going to talk about how it has worked for me and some of the ideas that relate to me. Now, the slide I wanted to show for you was something called the Eisenhower Matrix. And the Eisenhower Matrix is an idea of 4 segments. And in each segment, so in one segment, there are matters that are urgent and important. In another segment, there are matters which are urgent and not important. In the third segment, there are matters which are important and not urgent. And in the fourth segment, there are matters clearly which are not urgent and not important. So we can see a two-way axis of urgency versus importance. Now, as school leaders, clearly matters which are urgent and important occupy much of our attention. Sometimes as a school leader, it feels like we are fighting fires all the time. Every day you come into school, sometimes it seems like there is a new problem. There's a new crisis. There's a new situation that has to be dealt with. They can relate to parents, can relate to students, can relate to government or legislation, or I just mentioned COVID. I mean, I was head of school during COVID, as I'm sure many of you were. Everything we dealt with was urgent, everything was important, and none of it had anything to do with teaching or learning. At the same time, there are many matters which are urgent but not important. And those matters which are urgent but not important, that I think is where as school leaders, we often make our biggest mistakes. many matters which are in our face in the morning as we go into work and seem to have to be dealt with, calls which come in, emails which come in, messages or others. And we can be very bad, particularly if we want to work hard and do a good job. We can be very bad at filtering which of those matters are not important. Because if it may be urgent, but if it is not important, we need to delegate that. The fourth quadrant, not urgent, not important. If you find yourself filling your day with matters which are not urgent and not important, then again, your filter is broken. You need to be more successful at knowing this is not urgent, it's not important, it doesn't deserve my time. But the one that we do need to focus on is the one that is always forgotten. The one that is known as the quadrant of quality. And this is the material that is not urgent, but it is important. And that, of course, is actually the main focus of our work, which is teaching. It is interesting how, as school leaders, if we are not careful, a very high proportion of our time is spent dealing with matters that are unrelated to instruction, that are unrelated to the matters of teaching. It's very, very easy to get drawn into, yes, of course, urgent and important. You know, day in, day out, we may be dealing with matters of the safety of a child, the financial health of our school, whatever, very urgent matters that we can't avoid dealing with. We have to deal with those. But how much of our time as school leaders is actually devoted to instruction? That's what this conversation is about. So what is instructional leadership? Instructional leadership really has 4 elements. I mean, one is simply about focus. What did you do today as a school leader to improve classroom instruction in your school? The second one is about behaviors that enhance student learning. What behaviors in your school mean students learn more effectively? And what behaviors are preventing them from learning more effectively? And again, this may be something that is a low-level, easily ignored thing because it is not urgent, but there may be some practice or some pattern of activity in your school that means that learning is less effective. That can come down to things as simple as the organization of meal times, or it could be administrative, but it could also be about some kind of practice amongst your teachers or assessment practice that you have forgotten to look at, or you have chosen to, because it has been that way for a long time. No one has asked the question of, does this assessment enhance learning? This assessment methodology that we're using, does it enhance learning or does it inhibit learning? Because it's just what we always do. Instructional planning and delivery. I wish it was possible to arrange far more time for my teachers to have collaborative planning. They always say they want more time. I want to give them more time. The reality is it's very, very hard. But that is how are we managing our school to facilitate the planning of instruction, the planning of learning. And the fourth one, and I think this needs to be understood in a broad sense, is to be driven by data. The idea that we have a data-driven approach to our schools. Now, I'm very interested in how we can establish qualitative data. I'm less interested in things like test scores. Test scores and standardized testing, I think they often reflect a particular context and particular styles of working, and sometimes I think standardized testing leads to quite bad learning. Not deep learning, it can be very superficial learning because you're teaching to the test. So when I say data-driven judgments or data-driven planning, what I mean by that, I'm really talking about my personal observation. When I walk around my school, which I try to do every day, I think our walkthroughs are the most important thing we do as school leaders. When I do my walkthroughs and step into classes, or just observe through we have glass panels in the doors, or observe through the panels, or a lot of we have an open door policy at my school, so a lot of the doors are open, people come and go through the classrooms. We can do that because the design of our building allows that. It is not always possible, I know that. But those walkthroughs are how I gather data. It sometimes seems to me it is like feeling the pulse of my school. And that is how I begin to understand what is and is not working, and how we can try to deal with it. So to summarize those four again, and all the slide would have been was just these four things in bullet points. A focus on improving classroom instruction, the behaviors that enhance or inhibit student learning, the space that we provide to support planning of instruction, and how we gather data to inform our instructional leadership. Excuse me. Because a lot of what I'm trying to get at here is a distinction between leadership and management. Because we're all both of those. We have to be managers. Situations have to be managed. Schools have to be managed. In some ways, the idea that leadership is more important than management, or has a higher status than management, is only true until there's a fire in your school. And when there's a fire, you have to manage that situation, and leadership can be forgotten. Execution, tasks, daily operations, the stability, the hiring of teachers, the ensuring the salaries are paid on time, the establishment of resources, the maintenance of good systems. Of course, this is all management. And if those management tasks aren't being completed, then you forget it. There will be no instructional leadership. So this is not either or leadership or management. We have to be both leaders and managers. But management is not leadership. Leadership is where we get to establish or apply our values to our school. And if our values are, as I personally believe they should be, about learning, I think that seems to be, and I'm sure everyone on the call will agree, that goes without saying, really. If our values are about learning, then we need to be working out how it is that our leadership is creating more and better learning. There are four ways we might achieve that. One is, I think, to have a very clear idea ourselves of what learning is. That sounds perhaps to be too obvious. Oh, we know. But actually, when you dig down into it, there are different ideas about what constitutes learning. And that can have a very strong impact on your vision for what is a successful learning or successful instructional practice in your school. I have this problem in my school at present. My vision, the vision of learning that I've developed over my career, comes from aligns with the social constructivist theories that learning is a process that takes place in the space between learners and a more knowledgeable other through the social construction of knowledge, meaning, and understanding through engagement and activity in person. But as may be true in your country too, and in many places too, many business people and governments are increasingly interested in how learning can be made to happen using artificial intelligence or using online mechanisms. During COVID, there was a lot of talk about the future of schools all being online. And I say openly because this is an open conversation and a difference of opinion between myself and the chair of board of my school. The chair of board of my school is very interested in how we can have fewer teachers, we can cut the payroll, we can save labor costs by having children spend more time doing online learning using AI tools that are becoming increasingly fashionable here in China. But for me, that is contrary to my belief in what learning is. And my belief in what learning is informs my vision of learning, which is a process that takes place between people in a shared space. So when I am doing my walkthrough of my school, gathering data, I need to know what I'm looking for. And what I'm looking for is a process of this thing that I know as a teacher, and I've been a teacher for nearly 40 years. I know as a teacher when it is good. I know what it feels like when learning is happening. I know what it looks like when there's, and it doesn't involve computer screens, it involves human beings in a shared space. Now that is me, that is my personal vision. And it, as I say, it contrasts with what is an increasingly fashionable position here, where I work here in China. But I can't be an instructional leader if I don't have a vision of what I'm looking for to inspire or tell others to be. And then also to encourage and reward. When I see that in others, I can call it out and say, yes, that was teaching, that was learning. What was happening in that classroom today, that was it. That had the X factor. That was a teacher who was interacting and engaging. Someone, I think Munir has just said, human interaction is a learning key. Yes, intersubjectivity. Thank you, Munir. The space between the learners is, and the way that the teacher, through empathy, can adjust in response to the signals, both verbal and non-verbal, the signals received from the learners. And AI will never be able to do that until we hit the science fiction model of the singularity. Artificial intelligence relates to a single strand of intelligence, the knowledge or epistemic intelligence. It does not yet, and there is no realistic prospect in that, or certainly not in the immediate future, of it being able to manage empathy. But teachers have to have empathy in order to be able to understand whether the learning is happening or not happening, to be able to work with your students. This is why small class sizes are so preferable to large ones, because it's very hard to maintain empathy with a large number of students. I have worked with, particularly in East Asia, where there are some different visions of learning. In East Asia, test preparation and the ability to cram for tests is often taken as being evidence of learning. And the fact that I don't see it the same way has caused me some difficulty on occasions in my career. But that's what I mean by having a vision. Now, how can I inspire others to share that vision? That depends again on my ability to read other people. I have young teachers for whom I have the highest opinion. I tell them so. And I try to give them one-to-one time to support them and tell them, yes, what you're doing is what I think is great teaching. But I don't think it works if I stand up in front of a faculty meeting and try to give a speech like Winston Churchill. I don't think that works. I think people switch off when the principal speaks like that. So I try to do it by finding opportunities to have individual engagement with teachers and to encourage what I think is good and to steer away from things that I think are not necessarily working. Teaching quality, again, what is it? Again, it is the most subjective question. Again, I've struggled with board chairs and other officials who will say to me, because they come from business backgrounds, what are your KPIs for teachers? And the answer is that they are the reason young people learn better. A good teacher is one who is the occasion for learning to happen, the catalyst for the learning to happen. I mean, and the guide and for the learning to happen. But how do we know that learning is happening? Well, we tend to rely on assessment. But if our assessment is driving a certain type of learning, then that's the certain type of learning we will get. So then we come to a question of the ways in which we are being successful in planning the checking for learning, the assessment of that learning in line with what we believe really is learning. And again, this is extraordinarily difficult, particularly where there are standardized tests, because it is rarely the case that a government-designed standardized testing system is approaching the question of deep learning. The first person to, I think it's called William Fishburne or something. He was a Cambridge professor in 1792. was the first person to assign letter grades to student work. Before that time, no one had ever graded, as far as the history of education seems to suggest, because no one believed that before then that learning involved putting a letter or a number on something. Learning always involved in whether that be in the ancient schools or the apprentice systems, or here in China what they call the shuyuan, where the young scholars would train with their tutors. Assessment for learning was always through dialogue. You ask the questions, you understand how what is learned, and then you decide what is the next question to ask, or the Socratic dialogue, which is as familiar. We call it Socratic because of the prevalence of Western terms, but it was exactly the same method that was being used in Confucius. Confucius describes the way he sees education happening, writing at about the same time as Socrates on the other side of the world, and it is exactly the same process. We could call it Confucian dialogue, and I suspect the same is true in other parts of the world. So that again takes me to, I think, my fourth one, which is the idea of being people-oriented. I hope that the audience, with this being Pakistan, includes some cricket fans like myself. As a young man, my hero was an England cricket captain called Mike Brearley, who led the England cricket team to unusual success at that time. And knowing what we, at the time, and then subsequently learning about why he was so successful as a captain, was the deep knowledge he had of all his players. It wasn't great tactics, and he certainly wasn't a particularly great player himself. It wasn't great tactics, it was great understanding of all the different behaviors and motivations of the people that he was leading. So if we are instructional leaders and we're leading teachers, we need to know each of our teachers as far as we can. In big schools, it gets harder, of course it does. And it may be then that we are dealing with our leadership team, and we are trying to get them to do the same at the next level. You know, when I led Avenues, it was a very large school. Many of the teachers I had almost no exchange or dialogue with. I tried to mentor my middle managers to work in the way that I would work with them, in the way I wanted them to work with their teachers. It's what we have. I mean, scale. When there is scale, we have to delegate. Finally, innovation. I mean, instructional leadership, how can it be better? How can it be better? How can we make more learning happen in our situation? Now, I come back to the Eisenhower Matrix and the idea that this is non-urgent. And I think this is the sad truth. I think many schools function for long periods of time with quite poor learning happening. But it doesn't really seem to matter. Nobody loses their jobs, and I don't want anyone to lose their jobs. I want them to become better teachers, not lose their jobs. The school doesn't burn down. No one gets sick. The bills still get paid. It may be that people are passing government-assigned or standardized tests to a satisfactory degree, but I think I've already indicated that I'm skeptical about whether that amounts to actual learning. That is simply test preparation, which I don't think is quite the same thing as deep learning. So what are we seeking to do then as instructional leaders? Well, we are seeking to first of all maintain that focus. John Hattie, I believe it was, who's the famous New Zealand educational writer and academic in education, the leading figure in our field, established that schools succeed where teachers talk about teaching. How do we make it so that it is normal in our school communities for people to talk about or care about or keep their focus on their teaching? And what is it that we may be focusing on if we are not focusing on teaching? Again, ask yourself, at school today, how many conversations did I have about teaching? What percentage of my day was spent dealing with the question of teaching? If you are like me, there will be days when you have not talked about teaching all day. because there has been urgent and important stuff coming, and sometimes urgent and not important stuff, and I've lost my filter, and I end up dealing with that instead of focusing on teaching. So one, keeping our focus on teaching. Expectations. Let us not be satisfied with passing a test. Let us seek for deep learning. Let us know what we understand by deep learning, and not be satisfied with it's good enough if they get the grades. There's got to be more to this, and particularly given, and I fear for our profession, the growing belief that we can replace teachers with instructional software that will train children to pass standardized tests to the same or better degree that teachers used to, but not teach them in the deep level that is only possible through human interaction. Of course, you have to be doing the lesson observations. I'm sure you already do. I have maintained a practice of mentoring PGCE candidates. It is reasonably common in the international school world in East Asia for teachers to take an international PGCE. And as school principal, you might think, well, isn't that rather a heavy commitment? It is. I mean, I did this last year. I did an observation. A teacher was doing the University of Buckingham PGCE, which is a very good one. And it involved 30 observations of that one teacher. Many of them are lower. Test Institute PGCE can be as few as 16 or 12. But even so, it means spending a lot of time with a single teacher. Why do I think that's worthwhile? I think it's worthwhile because it helps me to keep my focus. When I have to talk to a young teacher who is making progress, I have to think about teaching to have that conversation. That then spills over into my other conversations. And it does mean that I am aside from doing, checkup observations, like the one observation a semester for a particular teacher or whatever, I'm actually doing some in-depth work with a small number of teachers, which allows me to lead conversations with a wider groups because it keeps my mind focused. How well do we know instruction ourselves? I don't know if it is customary where you are. It's not customary in the international school world in East Asia, but I still teach. I teach grade 7 class this year. I have always been a classroom teacher. I think it is not necessary to be a classroom teacher to be a school head, but I think it would be a lot harder if what you care about is instructional leadership. Because again, it takes you away, takes your focus away, takes your attention away. Because to repeat my earlier point, in schools, interestingly, while teaching is important, it is very rarely urgent. So what do? We have to set our expectations, say what we think good teaching is, make sure that conversation is happening all the time, make sure that we have a clear idea in our own heads of what learning is and how it happens. And when we are in dialogue with those who influence education but are not themselves teachers, business people, government officials, and so on, making sure that we hold firm to a vision of teaching that is the one that we know from our classroom experience, that is humane and deep, not superficial and factory style. Create a school culture that talks about teaching and get ourselves into classrooms. What about professional development? Yes, but that can mean so many things, and it's hard to organize. And it can be difficult, and the professional development that is necessary for one teacher is not necessarily the same as another. I try to make a distinction between professional development and personal development. I like to support teachers on their personal development, but as a school, we tend not to fund that. A teacher who is seeking to develop their own education away from direct instructional technique, we tend not to support. If it is, however, related specifically to their present duties in the classroom, we support it. Do we do enough? No, of course we don't. Does anybody do enough? I'm not sure. I think there's a lot of poor professional development. One of the problems we have in the professional development world, is that the people who sponsor professional development are often trying to sell us something. And whether the thing that they are trying to sell us is the thing that we need or want is a very different question. I've talked already about using data to inform instructional decisions. I want to restate my belief in qualitative data, and that means my observations, my opinions, my thinking, and the discussions we have. Data doesn't just come on a spreadsheet. Data is stories and understanding how and what you see, the qualitative data. And sometimes it's trusting your instincts. If you have reached a position of leadership in a school, it is because you have been in school for some time and someone somewhere believes that you have the qualities that are appropriate for that role. So trust yourself. This looks good, it feels good. You can think about why it is afterwards. But if it doesn't look good or feel good, you need to be thinking about and trying to analyze that. But you've got your data. The data is in your belly. You felt it was wrong. I mentioned earlier, I'm summarizing, I'm coming to the closing phase of this presentational element. I mentioned earlier about assessment. I don't think it is easy to focus on instruction and learning if we have assessment practices that do not align with our curriculum goals. If our curriculum goals include fine-sounding statements like a commitment to critical thinking, to communication, to collaboration, and then we set kids a multiple choice test, then we have not aligned our curriculum goals and our instructional goals with our assessment, and our instruction will change to fit that assessment. So I would say that my first year in my current role was spent redesigning our curriculum so that our processes, our assessment processes, were more closely aligned with the claims we are making about what we believe in for education. And resources, there's never enough resources, but if you can, if allocating resources to teaching rather than allocating resources to, I mean, again, it's interesting how often it's quite easy to get people to donate money to a school if they're going to get, you know, something that has their name on it, a piece of hardware. But the idea that they might donate money to a school so a young teacher can experience an exchange, say, by going to another country for a period of time, that tends not to be where resources get donated. Essential skills for instructional leaders. Yes, you're a school leader. You have to influence other people. You have to make them believe in your vision of what is learning. Goal setting and planning. You have to have a clear idea of where the school needs to go next. Not only what is not good. I heard someone recently say, oh, I like this school leader. She tells me all the things that are wrong with the school. I said, well, yes, I understand that perspective. But what is good about your school? How can we build that? How can we take what is good and make that our differentiator? Of course, we want to raise the standard of anything that is not satisfactory, but let us celebrate good too. And if you are making things better, you're changing them. Change management is hard. Machiavelli said that when change happens, the people who benefit from the change will believe it was due to their skill, and the people who do not benefit from the change will blame the leader. I think if you're a leader and you're involved in change management, you are likely always to experience some complaint and criticism. I don't think there's any hope for that. I think that's human nature. When change happens and it's successful, everyone believes it's because they did it. But Lao Tzu, the ancient Chinese philosopher, said that that is the key to great leadership, is that when the change happens and the people say we did it ourselves. I think if we become school leaders and we want to get praised for leading, we're probably in the wrong jobs. We need to know ourselves that we made the school a better place and not worry too much about whether anyone else is going to give us a medal, because they probably won't. So I think that's pretty much where I want to wrap. It's 5:45 for you. There's I think you may have gathered by now, I find it quite easy to talk about these topics, and I could continue to talk for a lot longer, but I won't because of the limitations on time. But the message is very simply to go back to that original question about the Eisenhower Matrix. How much of our time today, well, today's Saturday, I don't know if it's a school day in Pakistan, it's not a school day in China, but how much of your day, your school day, was spent on the important but non-urgent business of teaching? And then if the only thing you take away from this talk is to reflect on that each day, like what percentage of my day was spent dealing with making learning better in my school? I mean, for many of us, the answer to that question is sometimes a bit embarrassing because it's quite low. And that is the point of my presentation, I think. Can I please throw this open and see if anyone has anything to put in the chat box? And I'm sorry that the presentation didn't work, but there was nothing on it apart from those bullet points that I just spoke, so nothing lost.
Mr. Richard, I have this point for you to discuss on and shed light on it a bit. You talked about in your whole speech, you talked about how we should focus on the change from our point onwards, right? And how we should, as leaders, educational leaders, we should think about students as firsthand, and we should focus on them and what outcomes are they getting and what benefits they are availing for it. But I would say it's unfortunate that school leaders have to balance both sides, and they're basically juggling all the time. If I talk about here in Pakistan, I see this all the time, and these people, they're very, very, very competent with their work, but when talking about the balance between students and I would say the government, or I would say the education system, the national education system and the international education system, working with everyone in all aspects becomes a hard struggle. And I would say prioritizing these things become much more difficult when we take into consideration all our other, I would say, fellow schools. But what point would you say to these school leaders who are facing these issues, how could they prioritize their students? What mindset should they have?
I want to come back to the filter. I mean, the Eisenhower Matrix. I completely understand, by the way. I have exactly the same experience. It is so much of our working lives is spent dealing with things that is not connected to learning. So there's different types of leadership that we do. The instructional leadership, transformational leadership. A lot of what we do is transactional leadership. We are saying, if you do this thing, there will be this benefit. And we how much of our time is spent making, if you like, trades and deals with different parts of the organization. And an awful lot of our time is simply political leadership as we try to resolve conflict between different stakeholders in our school. So there's no single model of leadership for school leaders because we have to move between these different roles. The one that I'm flagging up is the one that I think gets lost because of all those others. Now, how to create space for it. If you try to develop the filter that helps you to know it may be urgent, but it's not important, therefore somebody else can deal with this. Secondly, how much of what you are dealing with is neither urgent nor important? It may be more than you think. There may be things you're doing that you don't need to be doing, but other people can do. That was the key. The Eisenhower Matrix is developed and named after, of course, General Dwight Eisenhower, who led the Allied forces in Europe in the latter part of the Second World War, and went on to become the U.S. president. And his strategy to make sure that he wasn't overwhelmed with stuff was to check on every task in front of him where it fell on that matrix, and to make sure he didn't neglect the non-urgent but important. And the other thing is, let's manage our expectations on ourselves. If we can do a little bit more today than we did yesterday, then that's a win. It's never going to be good enough, but let us just manage our expectations on ourselves and do try to take some pleasure in finding time to focus on these things, because fundamentally it is, from my experience, working with particularly with young teachers and visiting classrooms and seeing good things happen on that front. That's when being a principal is rewarding. Attending meetings and resolving conflicts and managing disputes and all the other things we do. I mean, I don't enjoy any of that. So if I can somehow manage to have part of the day when I'm doing something I like, then my personal motivation is stronger. It's not really solving anybody's problems, I know, but if we manage our expectations on ourselves, we delegate the non-urgent and non-important, or the urgent and non-important. If we delegate more and find time for quality, then we will enjoy our jobs better, and we may have more capacity to do the other stuff that we don't enjoy. I'm pausing to allow another question. You're all very quiet.
I'll read the question for you.
Mm-hmm.
We've got two questions.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I see. Oh, yeah. I just needed to scroll down here. Oh, I've got it here. I've got them. Sorry, I beg your pardon.
Yes.
I hadn't scrolled down the chat part.
Yeah. Can you see it?
Yeah. Yeah, I can now. Yes, sorry, that was. I didn't realize I needed to scroll down the thing. So the first one, with the changing trends from Farah Durrani, with the changing trends, younger or fresh graduates who enter the field of education are different and difficult, sometimes less professional. Leadership becomes challenging. Yes, you're so right. Gosh, I have this problem. I sometimes feel that as old folks, I'm 59 this year. I mean, it feels like the expectations that I had on myself when I started work are not the expectations people now have on themselves. Things that I regarded as part of the expectation of a teacher's duty now seem to be things I have to persuade people to do and make sure they get paid more. It does make leadership challenging. I think we have to identify early whether someone's professional ethic, and I think there is a generational shift, and if we're finding that maybe that's just an old man speaking, but that's what it feels like to me. I think there is a generational shift. We need to make sure that we are identifying early those young teachers who actually have the potential to show that professional ethic, and we fairly quickly remove those who don't. Because the labor laws vary from place to place, but in China, if you don't remove a poor quality employee within the first 2 years of their probation period, it becomes very hard to remove them at all. So I think we just have to be a bit more ruthless and make sure that that if we bring people on board and they don't get it, despite our best and most supportive efforts, we always start from a position of support, right? But if people aren't getting it, they have to go, because they'll only harm a lot of children. I don't mean they'll necessarily harm them, physically or anything else, but they'll just waste children's lives and children only get one childhood. They can't afford to spend any of that childhood with a teacher who doesn't have a good attitude, doesn't want to be a teacher. So we owe it to the children to get those people out. It's a strange thing is removing an underperforming teacher. It's no fun doing it, but it does make you feel a lot better when it's after you've done it. and the people around, because everyone knows, right? And the people around lift, the spirit of a community lifts when you've done that unpleasant but necessary job of removing an underperforming teacher. I'm going to go quickly because we're going to run out of time, and there's a couple have come through now, which I'm delighted by. How do effective leaders make difficult decisions while still maintaining trust and transparency with their team? I'm going to turn your question back on you. I don't think you can make difficult decisions without trust and transparency. I try to be clear with, I try to be, this is slightly unusual in China, where there is a great tradition of leaders being, if you like, having a strong different position of difference. There's a term for this, and I can't remember what it is, but the idea that the status is quite clear, and that if you as a leader show too much informality or transparency to your workers, you lose some of that status that is necessary to maintain confidence and trust by appearing to be kind of greater. I can't do that myself. I tend to try to work from a position of servant leadership, if you like, and say that these are the problems that we're facing, or this is the decision I'm making. These are my reasons for making it. I'm accountable for this decision. You're accountable on our organization chart for abiding by my decision. If it doesn't work out, then we'll talk about it. Some people like it. I've had positive feedback that style of leadership is appreciated, but I'm also aware that some people feel that it is demeaning for a leader to take that style. I mean, I'm too old to change now, but maybe that helps your thought processes. I don't know. And this next one: what strategies can school leaders use to support teachers who are resistant to changing their teaching methods? Yeah, a lot of it will depend on the labor laws in your country, the employment legislation. If you can't get rid of them, you have to sideline them. I mean, there's this, I have exactly this. I have a teacher who is unsackable, who is, in my view, not a successful teacher. This teacher repeatedly is reported to be complaining and doesn't understand why she is being passed over for preferment. There's a kind of arrogance from someone who won't change, who won't improve. You are in your position because you have been selected, because you have some experience and expertise that other teachers do not have, and you have a perspective that they don't have. And if they have the arrogance to refuse to at least explore the things that you're proposing, I mean, they don't have a learning mindset. If they don't have a learner mindset, it is a management problem. A lot of that will depend on the procedures available to you, and that varies from country to country, and there are different roles for trade unions and various other things. But you get to choose who you move into positions of leadership of your own, and you shift the culture of your school in terms of who you choose. And some people just get bypassed. Just going to moving again now as the clock's ticking down rapidly, and I know you're all waiting for supper. I certainly will not delay that for you. But what are the most measurable indicators that instructional leadership is positively impacting student learning outcomes? You know what? It's in you. It's inside you. Right? You know. Right? And I would be cautious about applying numerical metrics. One of the things that I think is interesting about learning, like, we don't have connoisseurship in our trade. If you have two paintings side by side, say two works of art, it is likely that people will be able to have an educated discussion about which is the more significant, which is the greater work, without having to put a number on why it is better or greater. We don't seem to have an idea about trusting the judgment of experienced professionals to say that what good learning was happening there. I saw it. But that that ability to know when it is happening, that comes from the observation of the experienced practitioner. And it saddens me that our profession doesn't respect, our societies don't respect that kind of judgment. And so we end up defaulting to numerical indicators like standardized testing as well. They did at one time. If you go back to, as I mentioned earlier, the teaching of the the golden age in your part of the world, or in Confucian China, or in ancient Greece. No one gave grades on numerical scores in those days. They knew if somebody was learning, they knew if somebody was not, and we do too. So we have to back ourselves. It's time. I'm sorry, Rosina, your question. Yeah, that's a good question too. How can educational leaders balance academic success with character building in students? By having a better definition of academic success, actually, is my quick answer. Academic success is meaningless without character. I mean, so we just have to make sure that what we understand by academic success is framed through character. Connector team, I'm aware it's time. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Richard Pratt. On behalf of Connector.pk and all the participants, we are here to present you with a certificate of appreciation, recognizing your valuable contribution to our exclusive webinar series 2026 and your support of our mission aligned with SDG 4, 10, and 17. Thank you once again for your time, your expertise, and your partnership. Thank you so much.
It's been my absolute pleasure. It only saddens me that you are just names on the screen, all you lovely and wonderful people. If only I could meet you all in person and sit in a room together and talk, that would make me very happy indeed. But this is what we have, so let us enjoy what we have. Thank you.
We are looking forward to it. Thank you so much, sir.